Hi, my name's Hemingway Jones. Welcome to the channel. Today I want to talk about a very effective study tool that I've been using for a very long time. I'm sure a lot of you do it as well. Today I'm going to share everything I've learned about starting and using a Commonplace book to do closer readings when you're reading a book, to write down certain things that you want to retain. So I'm going to go through everything there is to know about a Commonplace book. Its history, how to choose one for yourself, how to use it, and how to make your life better by leveraging and utilizing a Commonplace book. So join me today, won't you, as I go through everything you need to know about starting your own Commonplace book. Let's start today by talking about exactly what a Commonplace book is. So first of all, it's a place for you to write down different quotes and things, different information that you've come across in your study, almost like a notebook, so that then you can refer to it later on. It's not so much a place for original thought. It's more like a repository or library of various things that you've seen and encountered that you want to retain. One of the other really great things about Commonplace books are that it's an opportunity for you to use your fountain pens or to write, but you're not really sharing personal information in them. You're copying things, you're writing down things that you want to learn. But if someone should come across it, they're not necessarily learning any biographical information about you. So if you've been looking for an opportunity to write, but you don't want to share personal details, things you hold very dear or important things about yourself, this is a tremendous opportunity for you to use your pens and to write every day without self-revelation. So for those of you that want to keep your cards close to your vest, a Commonplace book is perfect for that. Yet, you'll find that those things you choose to hold on to and to learn do say something very valuable about yourself, but in a very sort of hidden, curated way. So it's a very powerful tool, and it's almost a bit of a code as you approach it. I just know for many people, if you write down these really intensely biographical facts about yourself, it can be very jarring when you go back and you look at it. It creates a certain dissonance. You don't necessarily want to face these things about yourself. Well, if you want to push all that to the side, a Commonplace book is just perfect to get beyond those feelings, but still give you an opportunity to write and to write regularly. So it's a tremendous tool for that. So now, while I've told you some things of what a Commonplace book isn't, let me get a little bit more into what it is. It really is a repository for your intellectual curiosity. It is your intellectual conversation with the world. If you find a song and you absolutely adore the lyrics, you write it down into your Commonplace book. If you find a quote that motivates you, even from a film, from a book, or whatever it is, you write that down as well. You may refer to it later, want to remember what it is. Or maybe you find a very stirring piece of music, classical music or something like that. You can write it down and then do some study later to dive even deeper into it. It's just sort of your notebook on your life. It's the study of yourself and your interaction with everything around you that you find inspirational. And in doing so, it keeps the focus on inspiration, on what inspires you, what makes your life more romantic and more magical. And I think that is a tremendous power in a Commonplace book. So now that we have kind of an idea of what it is, let's talk a little bit about its history. So commonplace books were very popular, especially in the United States in the 19th century. People would transcribe different newspaper articles, poems, parts of plays, whatever it was that truly inspired them went into their commonplace books. And I think it was a little bit of sort of a remote memory device, if you will. In those days, you didn't have a computer or anything else, so you would write it down into this notebook and you could refer to it. Now, one of the really interesting things is that so many of these are available and out there. You can pick them up on eBay, and they're an incredible way of seeing people's handwriting over the years in the pages of those books. So they're utterly fascinating. But the history of a commonplace book actually goes back at least to ancient Greece, where the term was invented for lawyers that were presenting their case in front of courts and the assemblies. In ancient Rome, where they had the locus communis, which was a place where people would write different pieces of wisdom. And I think that it's not too far to say that the writings of Marcus Aurelius are very, very similar to a commonplace book with a bit more of his personal thoughts added. But the basic Stoic ideas were copied from other sources. Now, this idea came from Rome and it was carried forward, and you saw it in the Renaissance as well, where students of ancient Rome and Latin would transcribe writers like Cicero or Catullus and have a conversation with these ancient sources while they translated them. Some famous users of commonplace books include John Milton, who famously had this terrible divorce from his wife. And one of the ways that he processed the abandonment and the feelings he was going through a list of binge reading. So that is a bit of inspiration for all of us to dive into some books if we're going through hard times. John Locke, the political philosopher, famously wrote a guide to how to make a commonplace book. And I will link to it in the description of this video so you can take a look at that for yourself. Arthur Conan Doyle, he used to use a commonplace book to write down all the different facts of criminal cases so that he could then incorporate them into his Sherlock Holmes stories. Some other famous users of commonplace books include Thomas Jefferson, W.H. Auden, H.P. Lovecraft, and more. So this has been a tool going back for centuries that you can use in your own life to make your life more rich, more fulfilling, and more successful. Let's now talk about how to choose the proper book for you to use for your commonplace book. I have some suggestions here. I think the first suggestion I would make, and I think this is very important, is to select a book that's not too thick. So you take something like this book. It is almost 500 pages. It's a little intimidating if you choose something this thick to start to carry around and fill up. It can feel sort of an indomitable task, and it might make you want to just put fluff in there or anything that you run across. It's not truly inspiring you. So I personally prefer slimmer volumes because it gives you a sense of accomplishment as you advance through them. I would also probably pick something with a hardcover. I love this Ayush book, and I actually have used parts of this as a commonplace book, but I do find that soft covers can really take a beating. And the one thing about a commonplace book is this is your friend. This is your companion. You're going to have conversations with it. You're going to carry it wherever you go far and wide, overseas, everywhere. So if you're going to do that and throw it into a bag, it really needs to be a hardy book that's going to stand up to all sorts of abuse. And this particular one is laminated, so it's not terrible, but it's probably not the best choice for carting around with you in all your adventures and your travels. A really good choice would be something like this Endless notebook, which is pretty tough. Has a nice hard cover. It's not so dear that you need to worry about it, and it does have lines. So that's another conversation you may want to have with yourself, whether or not you want lines or a blank book. And there really are advantages to each. So lines, of course, keep your writing very uniform and very disciplined because you only have these lines to work with. Whereas a blank book can also be used for writing diagrams, for doing sketches of various things that you see. And that really does free you up and free up your mind and your imagination as well. So you need to sort of weigh these two things, whether or not lined or blank pages are right for you. Another consideration, and especially if you're a fountain pen user, is the paper quality and whether or not it's going to bleed through and if it can hold up to fountain pens. So I do like Odyssey paper, which is very fountain pen friendly, the paper that they use, which is 68 gram Tomoe River paper, which is a lot of fun to write on. Another consideration, if you're doing things like watercolor sketches as you go along, is that paper needs to be even more hearty. This one is from Moleskine. It's a very hearty watercolor sketchbook. This would make an interesting format for a commonplace book. You could certainly use it either way, but you would have a lot of real estate if you want to do a watercolor sketch. Another consideration is the size. So something like this, as nice as it is, and I love this Odyssey, this is definitely one of my recommendations, but it's not something you can shove in your pocket, for instance, if you were to travel around. Whereas a book that I have been using is my little Lockbee mini field journal, because the size is just perfect. And what I do here is I've been using this as a commonplace book, and I often recopy it over to my regular journal. But this is brilliant for shoving in your back pocket and just not worrying about it at all. This can really take a beating. The cover is a bit like a little mini barber jacket for this book, and it's really easy to just shove in any pocket and stow it somewhere. Some of these other ones, this is also Odyssey with a very nice hardcover, good size, bit on the large size. You're not putting it in your pocket, so it has some limitations, but it's definitely going to hold up. And then this is a very nice Piniter journal with laminated pages. Gives it a little bit more flexibility. Has lovely lines, fantastic paper. It's almost too nice to use as a commonplace book, but another possibility. And this is also one of my favorites. This is from Atoms and Astronauts. This is a really nice journal from a company out of the UK. Great covers, very academic, very inspiring, always science themed. The paper's very nice, holds up, decent with fountain pens, and they have various formats that you can choose for your note-taking. So out of the notebooks that I have in front of me right now, my solid recommendations are for Atoms and Astronauts, Odyssey, which I love, and the Lockbee Mini Field Journal, which is just so convenient. There's also a bunch of companies out there that actually make branded commonplace books. I don't have any of those, but if that's a direction you want to go in, you could pursue that as well. So now that you've chosen your commonplace book, let's talk about how to use it. After all, that's the most important part, right? I think one thing that is really helpful to remember to do, which I often forget to do, is to select a little space in the front of the book for a table of contents. That way you can cross-index as you go along or even after you go along. I often, for whatever reason, just forget to do that. So I end up doing it at the back, which works just as well, but still there's just some more elegance to having the table of contents in the front. So I would select maybe 3, 4, 5 pages. I would say roughly maybe 10% of the overall pages for your table of contents. So that way you can find things easily. Another great tip for your Commonplace book is to use it to help to add to your vocabulary. I think we're all striving to speak English better, to have a pretty broad range of expression, and it's super helpful to write down a word that you don't know the meaning of, and then to draw a box around it so that you can find it easily. And then another tip is that you can then collect all of these and put them in the back as a glossary. So you can then reinforce these various words that you pick up in your readings of a newspaper, of a book, or whatever it is. That is a super helpful way to just increase your vocabulary and to give yourself more tools for self-expression. Another really helpful tip that a lot of people use in their Commonplace books, although if I'm being perfectly honest, I can't be bothered with this one, even though I love the effects. If you want your book to be more aesthetic, you can certainly use different color inks for different sections. If it's a vocabulary word, you could use one color of ink. If it's something you found from a book, you could use another. You could sort of color code the entire thing, and you have all these different colors and they have meanings, and it's absolutely beautiful. But to do that, you need to carry around a pen or pencil case with you with the various colors, keep them filled, keep them ready. I just can't be bothered with doing that, but I've seen the results and they're absolutely beautiful. So that's another way that you can use color, highlighters, rulers, all sorts of things to just make your Commonplace book your own, make it beautiful, and make it a more effective tool that speaks instantly to you. So while we're on the subject of making your Commonplace book even more aesthetic, you can use washi tape, stickers, stamps, whatever it is that keeps you motivated and engaged with your book as you progress through it. That makes for an absolutely beautiful book. I personally don't have that kind of artistry. Mine is much more like a straight up notebook, but nevertheless, when I see some of the beautiful work of people online, it truly is inspirational. So whether or not your Commonplace book is as aesthetic as can be, one of the things that does help is that some of these, like this one from Odyssey, has page numbers. And the page numbers are super helpful for making your table of contents or your glossary. Other ones like Atoms and Astronauts have dates at the top, so that makes it also very handy. Or you can certainly write your page numbers as you go, because one of the yearnings in a Commonplace book, I think, is for it to be well organized and for you to be able to index and find the various things that you've written in it over the weeks and the years. That's quite important if you want to go back and review them. So one of the things that I do with my Commonplace book, which I think is very, very valuable, and it certainly helps me in my writing and even in making these videos, and that is I do very close readings where I read and then I have my notebook handy so I can take notes on what I'm reading and write down some descriptions or words or just things that were done really, really well that I can use later. Because you need to get inspiration from wherever you find it. And one of the most obvious places is all the various books that you read as you go through the years. So I think it's very, very helpful to pick up the phrases that you find in a really interesting book like this one, which is actually quite good. So I believe using a Commonplace book really helps for you to retain your mental acuity, especially as you get older. It helps to keep you engaged with what you're reading, what you see, hear, smell, taste, and everything else as you go through life. It's just a tremendous way to open up the door in all of your intellectual pursuits and to codify it and put it within a structure, within this journal, this commonplace book, where you can go back and revisit all the different things you've learned and things that have inspired you over the weeks and the years. So, what do you think of a commonplace book? Is it something you use? Do you use it differently than I do? Do you have some more suggestions that can help people? Please leave it in the comments where the conversation never ends. So thank you so much for watching, and if you've reached this point, please subscribe. We go to some amazing places and I'd love to have you with us. And if you want to support the channel even more, membership is available. And for Illuminati and Cognoscenti members, we have a pen pal group and there's other fun things going on behind the scenes. So join us there. So I make new videos all the time and I have a live show as well. So I can promise you, we will see each other again very soon, further up the road. So take care of yourself.